Anton Krieger here. This episode of All Things Green is brought to you by NextGen Clean Energy Solutions, your sustainability easy button from concept to completion. Welcome to All Things Green. I'm Anton, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. Kwame Botchway is an impact strategist working in Northeast Ohio to improve economic ecosystems. Through his work with organizations like Citadel Impact Consulting, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, and the Global Shapers community, he's a champion for equitable community development and sustainability practices in both North America and African cities. Kwame, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for having me.
Carved out some time from your very busy schedule to be on the show today. Kwame, give us a short introduction. You were born and raised in Ghana, got your BA there, and then you moved to Cleveland.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Ghana, grew up in a small coastal community in Ghana called Keta. Moved to Accra for subsequent education, so went to college at the University of Ghana where I had my BA. Worked in Ghana for a little bit and then moved here to Cleveland to get my master's from Case Western Reserve University at the Mandel School.
How's Cleveland been treating you?
Cleveland has been good to me. So I feel like in other circles, a lot of my friends call me the Cleveland optimist because since I've been here, all my friends have moved to other cities, but I've stayed and I've just fallen in love with the community and I've enjoyed being here.
That's beautiful, and I think optimism is something that you have to have in a city like Cleveland, but I think it segues perfectly into your job with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress.
Yes.
Tell me about what you do with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress.
So I've been with Cleveland Neighborhood Progress, which is a family of organizations. We have a real estate lending and investing arm called Village Capital Corporation.
Yeah.
So that's where my position sits. Actually, but we work across the family of organizations. I work there as the director of community impact and innovation, where my job is to really help champion equitable development and real estate investing practices across our portfolios, and also encourage how can we get greater social impact and social value from the real estate projects and different other community development projects that we work on.
So what does sustainable partnerships in real estate look like? Does it look like entrepreneurship? Does it look like making sure that the right businesses come to a community? Tell me a little bit about what that looks like.
I think it's a combination of all of that. To a large extent, when people think about sustainability and they think about climate change and what needs to happen and all of those, two things. One thing is that a lot of the emissions and a lot of the greenhouse gas and all of those come from like the urban areas, the cities where there's a lot of houses and there's air conditioning that is being used, there's cars. Where you don't have public transit, you are seeing a lot of, other automobile. And in our region like this, for instance, the electric vehicle adoption is still fairly low. Across the board. So the contributors, cities are huge contributors, but at the same time, the impact will be felt most in cities. And so wherever conversations are happening, wherever work is happening in cities, wherever partnerships are being fostered, whoever is being invited to do any work in the city, they need to come in with a strong sustainability lens to understand how to do the work that they do effectively and sustainably.
And I think it's really interesting that in your position, you find yourself doing some interdisciplinary work. We even talked off the air about creating green spaces where people maybe want to spend their time. Tell me a little bit about these green spaces, the microclimates, and even affordable housing and how it all ties together.
Yeah, so I'll take it just a step back to talk a bit more. So within, as I mentioned earlier, within Neighborhood Progress itself, we have different portfolios. One of the portfolios that we've had for the longest time, which now we are allowing other organizations to focus on, that has been public spaces. And green spaces. So part of the example I cited was, if you look at Cleveland, the city of Cleveland itself, we have a lot of vacant lots. And there's a lot of thinking and conversation that's happening within the ecosystem around how do we use these vacant lots. And a lot of the ideas have been, could it be a community garden? Could it be held as a green space? Could it be a play space where children could go? Can we plant more trees in the city, especially in some of the east side, historically disinvested neighborhoods, to ensure that we have that tree canopy that we know have a lot of benefits for the community. And so even in the real estate development work itself, as you are putting out houses and building apartments and all of those, you have to also think about how you live in space for some green development. The houses itself that are building, are you using climate friendly technology? Is there space for solar panels? Can you change some of the equipments that you have in there? Can you make transitions to maybe heat pumps? For instance, can more climate friendly windows be installed and all of these things? So it's a long conversation, but it's a lot of pieces.
Yes.
Not just one person or one organization can do all of that, and which is why I enjoy the collaborative and the interdisciplinary approach, because we are all doing it differently. But if we can all come in with that lens, then we can really collaborate and make the change that we want to see.
On that note, I want you to tell me a little bit about economic development. How does local entrepreneurship uplift a community versus maybe a heavy-hitting developer coming into a neighborhood? And is there space for both of those to work together to create a healthy economic ecosystem?
Yes, there's always space for both, and I feel like that's the ideal model to pursue. So you have communities where you need some of the big players. We know that Sherwin-Williams, for instance, is building a headquarters in downtown, and
we're getting a new skyscraper in Cleveland.
Exactly, that's going to bring thousands of jobs downtown. It's going to make downtown more vibrant. But these who are living downtown would want places to play, places to eat, places to go to the gym, recreational facilities, and all of those. And so this becomes an incentive for the smaller businesses to also step in. So now the small mom and pop restaurants will have a new wave of customers that they can rely on. We'll see that spill over into some of the adjoining neighborhoods that we know are already doing well, but that could also go into the neighborhoods that have not seen much investment in the past. So I believe strongly in being able to attract the big larger corporations and businesses because they bring a lot more resources into their space and all of those. But at the same time, it's extremely and even also more critical to support the small businesses, because in America, small businesses are the backbone of the economy. They employ the largest number of people. And these small businesses also tend to care about the communities in which they are. So when you have strong small business ecosystems, you see the economy as a whole does very well. So part of the job I do now is I manage our small business lending and technical assistance portfolio. And I've been doing that for the last 2 years or so as part of the things that I do, and I believe strongly in that work.
I love that. And you told us a lot about your work here in Cleveland. Tell me about your work starting up a nonprofit and a C4 to take your work to an international scale.
Yeah, so even though I've been in Cleveland, worked in Cleveland for the last 7 years that I've been here, my work has been still also international in ways and forms. So I've been working with the World Economic Forum now for the last, I actually joined in 2017, right before I moved here. Wow. But within the last 3 years, my role expanded. So I'm part of task forces that we are trying to, one of the task forces that I'm on now with the World Economic Forum that we are wrapping up the work is we are trying to figure out if you have large development. So for instance, the Sherwin-Williams development, for instance, or the Cavaliers Global Peak Performance Centers that they want to build, for instance. If you have large developments like that, and you have cities or states or government putting money into those developments, how do those governments ensure that they are getting the greatest social value from things for that? How do they ensure that small businesses are benefiting, that residents are benefiting? So it's not just the building itself, but the community around it. Right. So what we are doing right now is we are developing a toolkit to help governments all across the world to do that. So that's expected to launch in October. So excited to see that. Me and a couple of friends of mine started a library in one of the rural, areas in Ghana where we are building a library, and the hope is that there'll be books, there'll be resources available to the children and all of those. I've advised nonprofits that are working on sustainability. I've worked closely in the past with an organization called Plastic Punch that does plastic and coastal conservation in Ghana. So I've done a lot of work in different spaces across the world. But I'm excited to be here in Cleveland and really lock in here.
Yeah. Off the air, we talked a little bit about how you would like to model the relationship that Cleveland and Dublin, Ireland has kind of developed in the last few years. Now there's a direct flight from Cleveland to Dublin. You want to take that to the next level and do this with more African countries. Can you tell me the value of creating those kinds of city partnerships?
Yeah. So one organization here that I've had a good relationship with for a long time is Global Cleveland. Shout outs to Joe Simperman and his entire team. Yes, love the organization. They've done such an incredible work.
Yeah.
Cleveland has had a lot of sister cities across the world, and I referenced Dublin. Ireland was one of them. You saw how the relationship was managed, and that led to the formation of the economic ties. And now you have direct flights and all of those. Even though Cleveland has had maybe 2 African cities that were sister cities before, we've not always figured out how to really nurture and grow those relationships. And so recently, Cleveland became sister cities with 3 more African cities. One of them is Tema, Ghana, which is in Ghana, and I helped myself and another colleague, Crystal Bryant, we helped to facilitate some of that relationship building. But the thought is that now that we have those relationships on paper, is there anything we can do to make it stronger? Can we organize business exchanges between people that are doing work here and people that are doing work back in there? Can we have linkages of resources? Can there be human capital exchanges? There's a lot of work that's happening in this space, for instance, around manufacturing, and there are raw materials that are needed, there's talent that's needed, and all of those. Can we have some of those exchanges to, just strengthen the relationship? So one of the things we are doing currently, which is a nonprofit that we are forming, and this is probably the first public platform that I'm talking about it, but we are starting a nonprofit, and it's called the PanAfrican Center for Transformation. And the goal of this is to mobilize the African diaspora, but also help cities that are building relationships with African cities to build those relationships more effectively and be able to manage them for mutual benefits across the board.
I think that's beautiful. And in a lot of ways, your cultural organization, it has policy platforms and it's connecting people. Yeah. And on the other hand, your C4 maybe will be in the advocacy realm. And how would you approach a congressperson saying, Cleveland is missing out, the United States is missing out by not having these sister cities that were really nurturing a relationship with African cities?
Yeah, and I think globally, around the world, different countries have come to see the importance of having strong relationships with, African countries. And so especially in the last 2 decades or so, we've seen countries like, China step up and try to do more work with African cities. Now, whether or not that relationship is the most beneficial to African cities, that's a different conversation. Or whether or not the work that China is doing in Africa is, the most effective or beneficial for African countries, that's a whole different conversation. But at least we know that they've come to see the importance and the benefit that they as a country could also get from doing business in Africa. For some reason, the U.S. hasn't done much of the same, but now we know that there's a lot of conversation in Washington, for instance, to figure out how can the U.S. build stronger relationships with African cities. So the benefit is that we have the largest, growing population of young people in the world. It's a huge market for goods and services, but also a huge market for talent. Really competent young people that are hungry for success and all of those. So how do you tap into all of this to build a more cooperative, world? And how can we do that more effectively? So the pitch is, if the U.S. is, the U.S. is the leader, in the world. If the U.S. is interested in continuing to hold that leadership, it's important to do or build strong relationships with different parts of the world, and Africa cannot be left out of that, conversation.
Absolutely. Kwame, thank you so much for talking all things green with me today. I know you have a busy schedule. We got to get you on your way, but we really hope to have you back, and so we can take an even deeper dive next time.
No, thank you so much for having me out. Be a pleasure to be here again to dive deeper in some of these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Kwame, I'm going to let our viewers know how they can stay connected to us.
Yeah.
If you'd like to support the show, you can do so on Buzzsprout using the link found in our show notes. Fans who will donate will be mentioned on the next episode and have their name listed in the end credits. Be sure to follow us on TikTok at ATG Show and rewatch full episodes on our YouTube channel, All Things Green Show. We'll be back soon, and thank you so much for being a part of the global sustainability movement.